That's why the chair was between us.
Good luck to you. I've tried to avoid this cold for like 3 weeks.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the special city council meeting this Monday, the 15th of June. First item on our agenda is the roll call.
Blessum. Here. Fuller.
Here.
Hayes.
Here.
Janser.
Here.
Olson. Pittner.
Here.
Samuelson.
Here.
Let's say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next on our agenda is some budget workstation items. We're going to start with the City of Minot Fleet Management Program, and welcome, Brian.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk a little bit more about our fleet program. The intent today really is provide council with a complete site picture of where we are sitting today, as well as provide staff recommendations for a vehicle replacement list moving into the 27 budget cycle. So with that, we're going to discuss current state of the fleet program, capacity, capabilities for our fleet division itself. This is tying back to the manpower piece. Recommendations for the fleet replacement priorities, and then finish up with, again, the request or approval tying to the fleet replacement list or seeking direction from council if there are adjustments that needs to be made as we head into the 27 budget cycle preparation. So with that, Jen, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So big picture wise, we have roughly about 724 vehicles. This does include both rolling stock, non-rolling stock equipment items. This broken down a little further, we really manage the rolling stock pieces pretty closely within our fleet division. The team oversees roughly the maintenance on about 444 vehicles itself. This is broken down, as you can see, in the next three sections for both the general fund, enterprise fund, as well as our special revenue fund, just to give you an idea of where we're sitting as far as our fleet composition. So Jen, if you want to rotate to the next slide. Here we go. All right, so the vehicle and equipment maintenance piece, I'm going to spend a little bit of time here because as we just talked about, you have an understanding of how many fleet vehicles are being maintained by our staff. Well, this is a breakdown of exactly what the staff does from year to year. Right now, back in 2025, the team was able to accomplish 1,949 maintenance actions. Now that's tied to about 47% preventative maintenance actions, 53% of total repairs. Now this gives them roughly about 11,063 hours of work time, okay? Kind of putting that into picture. We have 7 mechanics. We have 7 technicians that are working on our equipment every single day, every single year. The biggest concern we run into is making sure that we are right-sized when it comes to our full-time equivalencies to make sure that we're able to accomplish all maintenance actions, especially preventative maintenance actions on these fleet vehicles to keep them roadworthy. If we fail to go ahead and do that, that really equates to service stoppages. So Jen, if you want to rotate to the next slide, please. So here's where I want to introduce the concept that we're following right now as far as our predictive analysis. Looking at our maintenance repair units. So we use our MRUs as a way to go ahead and give us an idea based off of our fleet, how many FTEs we should have in place to go ahead and accomplish the maintenance actions that are necessary. So in this case, using the national standard of anywhere between 10 to 15 hours of maintenance per MRU unit, we went ahead and cataloged every single one of our pieces of equipment and identified exactly how many hours it would take to maintain that if we were to go ahead and predict how many hours of maintenance are going to be required. So in this case, we're at about 12,612 hours to go ahead and maintain our current fleet as it's sitting today. Again, I mentioned we only use 11,063 hours of this, okay? So then that really gets into our capacity. Why is it that we have such a delta here between what we're predicting and what we're actually showing? Well, our current tech capacity is really where we're at. This is where our biggest problem lies. Right now, we have 7 techs. So of those 7 techs, we have 6 that reside on our within our fleet department, fleet division, and 1 that resides within our transit department. Okay, so again, as you can imagine, they're only really there 20 or 2,080 hours per year, minus the PTO time that we've mandated that they have to take. So that's where this computation comes from. So what we've broken down is taking out the PTO hours, training hours. So conceivably, we would be getting 1 FTE equivalent to 1,812 hours. And again, that's where we come up with our numbers. If you actually look to the right-hand side here on that gap analysis, just to go ahead and determine where we are currently sitting, this is why when I first started, I made that statement. We are adequately staffed for where we are at currently within our fleet division, okay? Right now, based on the numbers, based on our actuals, we really need 6.96 FTEs to go ahead and accomplish the job that we are doing every single day. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. We're not trying to increase our fleet. We're really trying to consolidate and make it a little less while still providing the same level of service and coverage for the city itself. So Jen, if you want to go to the next slide. All right. So we've talked about the equipment. We've talked about what it takes to go ahead and maintain the equipment. Now we're going to turn our attention over to the fleet replacement approval process, because at some point, these vehicles need to be replaced. So I really broke this down into a 4-phase process. We talked about it last year. We're reviewing our fleet management plan. This is really just a simplified breakdown of what that plan was. So for phase 1, we conduct an inventory in late October to go ahead and determine exactly where we're sitting to date. From there, our fleet superintendent would go through and determine how many vehicles needed to be updated within our asset work system. At that point, he'd convene the fleet management working group that is comprised really of members from each of the departments throughout the city to go ahead and give equal representation for them to come forward and work with the team to go ahead and determine the best replacement list that is going to satisfy everybody's requirements for, again, every priority across the city. Phase 2, once we construct that list and we've identified the metrics that we're going to use to go ahead and score out each of those items, we convene the fleet evaluation board. Now, this board is comprised of our department heads, our city manager, and our finance director. Realistically, we could probably include a few other individuals. We chose not to. We wanted to keep it to this smaller group to really hone in on the list that we've actually provided them coming out of that fleet management working group process. Phase 3 is where we're at today. I would like to go through, just like we did with the CIP, provide a breakdown of what items we would like to see replaced going into the 27 cycle. However, we do understand that priorities are what they are. We have to go ahead and shift where we need to shift, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation today with council. Last, once we get council's approval, we would like to move forward within the city manager's proposed budget and include some of this data in there as well. And this ultimately will help us kind of narrow in getting down to that dollar figure that we need to work within our current budget as it moves forward for 2027. So Jen? All right. I didn't touch on this too much, but I do want to give you guys a little bit of insight into how we prioritized our scoring criteria itself. AssetWorks is a great software system. It gives us up to 13 different metrics categories that we can go ahead and use to capture data. It's also newer. So there's a lot of areas that I think we need to improve on. So what we've done and what I've asked our fleet superintendent to do is narrow down on some categories that are really across the board, national standards wise, things that all fleet managers would look at. So here you see the age of the vehicle, the usage of the vehicle, the maintenance cost per unit, and then we also have the maintenance overall cost itself and the reliability of vehicle itself all come into consideration when we start scoring these out. Fortunately for us, this year we had an opportunity to update our system free of charge. It was part of the module package that was already with AssetWorks. We were able to upgrade it to where now we don't have to do this manually. Last year, this took a couple weeks to go ahead and update and score out. We ran it in about 5 minutes. able to do a raw data pull. It was able to categorize everything we needed within the system and apply these weighted scales accurately for us. And all we had to do is take that information, put it in front of our fleet management working group, and then they went ahead and provided their professional judgment to realign based off of what they felt the priorities of the city needed to be. All right, so this gets us to our general fund replacement recommendations. It's a short list. Right now, it equates out to roughly 2.4 million, give or take. Not all of these vehicles are going to be vehicles that get replaced in 2027. We understand that. What we would like to do is put these in priority order, and this is why you see on the left-hand side priority 1, 2, 3, and then 4 through 7, just to go ahead and give council a better perspective of what staff is recommending as we move forward into the 27 cycle. And if we're able to move further down on that list, it's only going to benefit us and those services even more. So the first priority here I would list as our fire control. It's a new ladder truck. It comes in at roughly about 1.7 million. Staff has been working on a few different leasing options of what we can do over the long term. Again, I don't want to go too much into that unless council has questions regarding that specific vehicle. I can definitely talk to our finance director. I'm sure he's been part of those conversations as well. The next priority is our Johnston Global. And I will highlight this because this is something that our team has had numerous problems with our current fleet. Right now we have 7 sweeper vehicles. At any given time, 3 of them, 2 to 3 anyways, are down for maintenance or having some problems. So really we're not giving the service that we need to, or the quality of service that we need to our citizens, okay? I think there's some improvement areas. So this is one of the items that Chuck was going to recommend that we replace as a 2-for-1, meaning we get rid of 2 vehicles and we replace it with a newer vehicle to go ahead and give us more efficiency within the unit. Since we've already been operating at a lower capacity, this would only give us a better opportunity to not only drive down those maintenance costs on the older vehicles, but also get us a return on our investment as well earlier on while we can. The next one is the Priority 3 Street, the Sterling LT 7500. This is really a dump truck for the street department. This is a hauler. We use this for salt sand hauling when we can. We use it for other gravel movements of material throughout the city when we need to. Our current fleet right now is a little bit old. I have another breakdown of this if we need to look at it. But again, that's how it rack and stacked within the system. And the last ones, again, we consolidated because, again, these are lower on the priority list right now just because of the current age of the fleet and then how they score it out. But we would be looking at the police admin vehicle P1 inspections. They were due for a replacement in 26, which had to get shifted to 27 due to funding availability. Property maintenance. There are some vehicles there, a single vehicle right now that we would like to go and get replaced with a smaller truck if we can. And then again, the Harper Hillside mowers are kind of reaching their age, life expectancy. We'd like to get those replaced as well for our mowing crews. For our enterprise fund replacement recommendations, I batched these out the best I could, mainly because we have the same division essentially covering those items. So priorities 1 and 2, I'd like to get after those first if we could. Really kind of covering the Freightliners, the garbage trucks. They are becoming more and more problematic. They are difficult for my staff and my team to go and work on within our fleet division. They do take a little bit longer. So we've been noticing some wiring issues and some other problematic problems that we'd like to address by replacing the fleet itself as we start running into these issues. Priorities 3 and 4, we have water distribution, our Freightliner dump truck, our F-250, and as you can see, the remaining items, again, they are prioritized, but I think we can get after those later. I will foot stomp this, though, on the enterprise fund replacement side of it. It really doesn't affect property tax dollars. These are all of the fees that are collected within these departments to go ahead and offset the cost for these vehicles themselves. So. All right, so with that, I'd like to, again, respectfully ask council for your thoughts. I'd like to hear if this is something that you would like to recommend or you would like to approve. If it's not, please let us know your priorities. I'm happy to adjust. I'd like to treat this as an open discussion and an opportunity for us to take feedback and make changes as necessary.
City manager?
Thank you, Brian. Mr. Mayor, members of council, before we get into that, I'd just like to follow on. So, we started this last year. We were working towards the fund, the VERF, right? Made a determination that we didn't have monies available to, even seed money to start that program. So, but what we did is we didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, right? The process was still good. We had experts at department level working with Chuck Schmidt and team to develop that was the working group level. So the first level, prioritize, have really good discussions. As Brian said, based on the data that we have, we're not able to fully utilize asset management, but it certainly helps inform, more subjective decision making. There's objective data there, but it comes down to some subjective decision making, which then myself and the department heads, we sat down with Brian and team on the evaluation board and, kind of murder board these things, going through to asking some tough questions because, again, every penny counts and kind of where it lays out. Currently, we'll talk a little bit more about the budget for 2027, but as Brian said, none of these are in the budget. They're not in my proposed budget at this point at all. Certainly I'm thinking about which ones I would put in, but as we get through the next couple of weeks, we get through department head briefings to the new council and work forward towards my proposed budget presentation on or about the 16th of July. I can expect to see some of these vehicles to be in this budget for this year. But with that, we're just kind of using the same process that our city engineer Lance Meyer used in the CIP process. So our capital improvement plan and program, using that, for our rolling stock and just, best practices and trying to make sure we're using, everybody's knowledge and experience, not just as a department head and where they grew up, but everybody can have critical thinking and questioning and going through that. So I'm confident that this process has improved from last year, and I'm confident that it'll get better in the years to follow. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brian, so I'm going to jump to the elephant in the room, the fire truck, okay? What year is that fire truck or that ladder truck we currently have?
Let me go ahead and look it up real quick, unless Chief K has it off the top of her head.
Okay.
Bear with me 1 second.
Sure.
Mayor, Alderman Fuller, that is going to be a 2016 E1 Typhoon Ladder 5 truck.
Okay. So then my next question is, how many calls has that truck been on in its life? We've had it 9 years, 10 years now. How many calls has it been on? And if we can't answer, how many total calls, how many calls was it on last year?
Mayor Alderman Fuller, I'd have to provide you that data. I don't have it off the top
Okay.
of my head.
Could-
I would certainly be able to do that for you.
Perfect. So I guess my next question is, have we checked on, well, so when I was in Colorado, one of my clients was Super Vacuum in Fort Collins, Loveland, Colorado. They built fire trucks. So I know ladder trucks have an average age of 15 to 20 years. We're talking about a ladder truck that probably doesn't get the use that it would in Chicago or Miami or Los Angeles, replacing it within a 10-year period. So I highly question why that would be one of our main priorities right now, especially given probably the low volume of calls that it's been on. Second, have we looked at rebuild cost versus buying a brand new one? Because I know a lot of those companies will also rebuild them for you.
Mayor Alderman Fuller, to your first question, you make a very good point. I was not part of this conversation. It was with Chuck, our fleet manager, as well as our assistant chief and the mechanic and the supervisor of the mechanic. And they're not here, obviously, that made the determination that we needed to high prioritize that one. I know that truck has cost us a lot of money in maintenance, and I'd have to go back and pull some of that data for you, or bring that forward from that group. And your second question on rebuilding them, I know that was something that Chuck had looked at, and he wasn't recommending it because it was something that we had looked at. I do know that. He had met with a few vendors and talked through that process.
Okay, so Brian, I guess since you were more a part of the conversation, thank you very much, Chief. If I could get the life of the calls and the number of calls last year, I would greatly appreciate it. So what are we basing the replacement on then? If it isn't old and worn out and it hasn't been on a ton of calls, what are we basing the replacement on as our highest priority?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Fuller, this was professional judgment. This is a recommendation that came from Chief K's staff during the Fleet Management Working Group. This was a new item that was actually brought to the Fleet Management Working Group itself as an identified item that they would like to see added in based off of the current fleet for the fire department.
But what are they basing their professional judgment on, Brian?
The age of their fleet, basically.
It's 10 years old. Like, those things have an average life of 15 to 20 years in high volume areas where they roll them every time they go out of the fire station. And we obviously don't do that in Minot, do we?
I would have to ask the fire department.
Well, I guess with that one, I think as a council, as a group, I would want some more information from Chuck and some of the other people as to why we're recommending this be one of the big replacements right off the bat when it's probably one of the least used vehicles in our whole fire truck fleet. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Blessing.
Thank you. So just to continue on that, I mean, we're talking about putting 70% of our general fund budget for vehicles into this one. So Tom, I certainly would want to know a lot more here. And I think we would want to have a pretty good picture that, hey, above every other vehicle and rolling stock need that we have, we want 71% of it to go to this year. So I think we're going to need to have pretty good discussion on that. So Brian, just to go back through the presentation just a little and make sure that I'm understanding, because when we talked about the VERF last year, you know, we had discussions. I don't know that there was a lot of objection overall to the funding concepts brought forward in the VERF, the idea of how we distribute the funds and where they go and how they get spent. For me, the biggest issue was what we were doing is we were setting up a plan that was very direct. In your words, it was objective, right? It said, when this type of vehicle reaches this life stage or this number, we do replace it. For me, where I really tripped up, as I said last year, was we're going to spend more. There's no question that plan is designed to replace things sooner. That's the plan. So it's going to cost more. I have a hard time signing up for that. So I think, and I assume nothing's changed. I just want to make sure we kind of level set with where the discussion was, because I think the funding mechanisms, we can maybe look back at that and get back there, because I think overall that probably makes the most sense about how we do that. But I think in terms of doing it that way, I have a hard time with it. So just to dig in then, 10 to 15 hours per vehicle per year. So when we talked about this last year, one of the things that I was hoping for was if we made big investments and really started making our fleet much, much newer, that would change. Like, so suddenly, let's say a vehicle 4 years or newer requires only 4 hours a year. Like, if that was the case and there was a legitimate way to say, hey, we only need 3.5 FTEs for maintenance techs instead of 7, now we got something to talk about, right? Now we've got a real discussion to have. But to my recollection, that was not the case. That it was 7, and what we're guarding against is getting any bigger, really, right? And I think that's where we still are.
So, Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessum, there's a few things to kind of break out of that entire statement. The first one is it is an objective assessment. When you end up getting a vehicle that needs to be replaced because of its age, you're still going to go through and assess that vehicle for what it's capable of, what its current life is, what the maintenance costs have been up to that point, and what the resale value or the auction value is going to be for that vehicle. Now, if it doesn't meet those thresholds, it would be removed. It would be considered. The time when it transitions from when it's being considered to the time it's being removed is when those maintenance costs start growing. And this is a good example of what I'm talking about as the maintenance costs start to grow, okay? It's really age related. You would expect more use of a vehicle. The older the vehicle is, the higher it's going to be from a maintaining standpoint, okay? So if you actually look at the left-hand column or left-hand side here, this gives you a breakdown of each of the departments across the city. This gives you a breakdown as well of their equipment totals. And this right here, when it comes to the MRU, you have different maintenance classes for each of the vehicle, which drives that MRU classification. I'll use, for example, a sedan is going to be one maintenance unit. One maintenance unit could equate to, per national standards, anywhere between 10 to 15 hours of maintenance. If I were to go ahead and look at this sheet and identify that here with some of these vehicles, a sedan right now on average is not taking 10 to 15 hours, depending on the age of it. It could be taking as much as 13.16 hours. And those are our actual breakdowns. And we have for every single vehicle exactly how many hours for maintenance was spent on that for each individual vehicle. Those are items that we're looking at. That's part of that consideration piece.
So if I can continue, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
So as we go down the list, then the next item that you brought through then was the street sweepers, and I think this is a good example of where this thought process matters, right? Because now we're looking at something that says, hey, we can swap out 2 aging vehicles for 1 new one, if I caught that right, and we should then actually save maintenance because we don't have 2, we got 1 now, right? And we're also getting an age benefit. So now, in my mind, we get into a real, it's not quite actuarial, but it's along those lines where there's a calculation, right? You can actually figure this part out. And so the question would be, is this an isolated case, or are you guys finding more of these? Because, are we, like the garbage trucks would be another one that would be of interest to me along the exact same lines. If we've got, let's say, and I don't remember the number, we're something like 7, 8, 10, whatever that number is, but we're down 20% downtime all the time, we're actually getting by with 1 less anyway. And so again, swapping 2 for 1 and updating can be worth it. And then the really interesting part gets into, okay, well, what happens to the staff? Right? So if we've only got 7 trucks to work with instead of 9, we don't have a place to put everybody. And now we've got to look at staffing and make sure that we're right-sizing all that. So are there other places where you're seeing this same concept with the sweepers?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessum, yes. If you remember from last year during the fleet plan discussion, I had highlighted a fleet much larger than what we currently have. I believe it was in the 850s range or right around there. It is through this process that we identified items that were in our system that should have been deleted. There were items that needed to be auctioned because we no longer needed to carry those items. We've been submitting batches to council for the past year, year and a half to get those off of our fleet inventory, kind of driving down those numbers. And the last effort that I've worked with my staff is I said, look at about a 10 to 15% cut in our fleet. Find ways to go ahead and drive down our numbers while not affecting service. And my team was able to do exactly that. Chuck, on his own, was able to start identifying specific fleet vehicles that we can either rotate to other departments through his connections with every single department and working really closely with our fleet management working group members, or looking at these 2-for-1s. You know, cemetery right now, we're doing the exact same thing. We have 2 tractors right now sitting over at the cemetery. We're looking at replacing it with what we just tested out as a viable option, which is a much cheaper option than replacing it with the like item. And it's a 2-to-1. We are looking at that across our entire fleet just to go ahead and drive down costs long term. And I didn't touch on this earlier, but I do want to touch on it here. We are seeing a steep incline when it comes to these maintenance costs. And Alderman Fuller, I agree. I think we need to take a good hard look at what we are doing and when we're replacing these vehicles. But the issue we run into is if we don't start managing how much maintenance is going into these vehicles, we're going to quickly do the exact same thing. We're not going to be spending money on new vehicles. We're going to be spending money on replacement parts. We're going to be spending money on fixing these vehicles. And I have a staff of 7. 724 vehicles, or 444 rolling stock vehicles, are being maintained by those 7 individuals with assistance from a few different entities. We have over at a landfill, we have a great technician out there really helping us out. Okay, but we're not accounting for those hours. We have great technicians over at the cemetery that are doing outstanding jobs right now that are not accounting for those hours, and we're working to go ahead and get them added into the system so we're truly accounting for the work that's actually being performed. But if we don't start doing a better job at documenting our maintenance and getting our systems up where they need to be, we're not going to be able to provide council a true assessment. And that is one flaw with our system right now, and that is something I've been working on for the past year and a half to, one, do a software upgrade, do a mass inventory updating for all of our systems. It's the reason why I've been doing so frequent of inventory checks, as well as trying to get different individuals trained up. We've been working with the developer to go ahead and even set up a in-house training once we get the system ready to go to take on that practice. But again, at the end of the day, the older these vehicles get, the more maintenance is going to be required. It's just going to drive up costs one way or the other.
I can continue.
Alderman Blessum.
Thank you. So Brian, along those lines then, so, you mentioned there's a big difference between, let's say a PD sedan, a regular car, let's say, versus a dump truck, right? For one thing, I would think you've got a different level of skill within the technicians, even if you got diesel mechanics versus someone who is typically working on sedans. Do you have a sense? I assume we're doing everything. We're doing fluid changes. We're doing all those checks. Do you have a sense today of what it costs the taxpayer to do a oil change, a basic service on a police cruiser?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessum, that is something we can delve into. Again, it really depends on that technician itself updating the information correctly in the system, because we do track the ELM data. Really, it's equipment, labor, material, making sure that we're tracking the technician hours, making sure that the parts and services that they provide for that specific piece of equipment are documented accurately, as well as their time. So I could actually look into that if you would like.
Yeah, and if I can continue, Mr. Mayor, I really would like to see that, and really where my mind is going here, I think it makes sense for us as a city to have a base set of staff that handle maintenance. Okay, I think that can work up to a certain point, but I think the flip side of that is that all of our I don't want to say fluff in terms of the work, but the overflow, let's say, the overflow side of it. So let's say it's ebbing and flowing. We go through a bad spell and we need 10 people's worth of time, but we've only got 7. It's overtime or it's whatever. I would imagine that we've got, 30 businesses in town that would love to take on the city's basic maintenance of our vehicles. And we could put out contracts for that and have ways to do it and handle overflow on a pretty easy basis. And so, again, I'm not suggesting we do that this second. That's not my point. My point is that I don't think that we've got to be beholden to the MRUs, the hours, the exact time to drive staffing costs and everything else that's associated with it. I think as we go through this process, and that's why the great work you guys are doing to identify these opportunities, that's going to help us right size that and get that figured out. I guess with that, I would love to hear, we're going to hear more about the fire truck at some point. I think we definitely got to hear that, because to be honest with you, I'd love to hear what's down the list further if we've got another 1.7 to work with. I assume there's very important general fund spending that the department heads are asking for that we're not even seeing in the first 7 here.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessum, you're correct. I think the list here is basically every single fleet vehicle we have. We have a comprehensive list that basically rack and stacks them from number 1 down to, depending on what we're talking about, general fund or enterprise fund, that could be 200 plus, 300 plus. One thing I will say, though, as far as the MRU usage or the maintenance repair unit usage, we do it long-term to help right size what we are doing in a few different areas. Policy is one of them. You mentioned using our third-party contractor support teams that are out in the local area to go ahead and help us with some of these fixes. We are. Mr. Chuck Smith did a great job at creating those relationships, working closely with those individuals. He established a shop policy mainly with sanitation, because we were noticing extended downtimes of some of the vehicles, which was creating some service concerns for their team. We put a restriction on how long we were going to let our staff continue to work those pieces of equipment before we outsource those. We work closely with the department heads to make sure we're not going beyond what they have currently budgeted for that year. Most of these are non-preventative maintenance action items. So again, this is something that they would not have predicted happening in the previous year's budget development. So,
Alderman Samuelson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Brian, you and I talked about this a little bit, and I just want to put it out there. I really hope that we can come up with a plan for buying used vehicles. And the reason why I say that is I'm looking at 5 vehicles on here for the pickup trucks, a sedan that we could easily buy, would be a year old, with 7,000 to 15,000 miles on it. And we'd save, the one thing that I looked at is at our last council meeting, we approved 2 SUVs for the biota plant. Well, I started looking that up. If we could find used ones, we could buy 3 for that. So I just, I hope that we look into that, because, at the plumbing board where I'm at, that's what we do. We buy them and they're, a year or 2 old, and they got anywhere from 7,000 to 15,000 miles on them, and we save 10 grand every time we buy one.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Samuelson, completely agree with that statement. I think there is an opportunity there. That's the reason why we started looking at the refurb option for the transit buses. Couple things we are working right now on is, and Chuck has done this in the past, try to rotate vehicles from department to department first to go ahead and see if we can get usable life or extend the usable life of those vehicles. Oftentimes, it's the nature of the beast. I mean, the vehicles are pretty well used by the time they get to that point. All of our fleet right now are really kind of suffering because of that. So it makes it more difficult for that type of activity to happen. Mr. Smith also looked into previous years or a couple year back options. We've done a few surplus sale options. We had a fleet roundtable discussion with our regional partners, just seeing if there was anything anybody was using to go ahead and answer that exact issue. And what we kept coming back with, and again, Chuck has conveyed this to me several times, warranty issues, maintenance of those used vehicles often offset the cost difference between the used vehicle and the new vehicle over the life or the short life of that vehicle. And those are things that he really delved deep into to go ahead and make that determination. I'm not saying that's the case in every case. I think we can continue to do that practice and see if we can find those cost savings where we can, and see if we can't get the bumper-to-bumper type warranty for those used vehicles that is very similar to the vehicles we were carrying brand new.
Any further questions for Brian? City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Very much appreciate your dialogue and your discussion. So this is very helpful. And, again, we all want to be best informed and answer the questions and think ahead. So appreciate that. Brian, thanks so much to you and your team for putting all this together.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Alderman Wesson.
Just one last thing. We have all three of our new aldermen here. When we went through this 2 years ago, we were a part of the discussion most times after the council had discussed things. In my mind, it'd be appropriate to ask them if they wanted to approach the podium and ask a question or relay their thoughts. I mean, they're going to have a decision on these items here in a few weeks.
Sure. That'd be fine. Any of the new aldermen who are in the wings have any questions on this? Okay, fair enough. All right. Seeing none, we'll move on then. That takes us to 2.2, which is a 2026, 2027 budget discussion. Jenna, I believe, is going to provide us with a presentation to that topic.
In a little bit. Sorry, the font is. Okay, good afternoon. Tom Joyce had asked me to present kind of where we're sitting for year-to-date 2026. So I just took a little summary screenshot of the dashboards that we use internally. So the first page, and I did give these to our council members-elect as well, so they have that. First page is going to be your general fund. So from left to right, you have your original budget, your revised budget, your actuals, encumbrances, which are things that are tied up either in a purchase order or a contract. Requisitions is the system term for a request to purchase, so those items haven't been ordered yet. However, they've been entered into the system to budget check, so that's what that column represents. And then it gets you to your available budget. And then the percentage of current year percent used. I did have it highlight if it's 42% or more. These numbers are pretty reflective of the whole month of May, but I'll caveat that they're a little preliminary. We haven't closed that period. So it is inclusive of all payroll costs through that month, but there's probably still some May services that have yet to be billed. So I'll caveat that they might not be the final numbers. Then we transition into the enterprise funds, which is page 2. Only one department to really be, I don't even want to say concerned about, but that has a red highlight. Similar format, so that's high level where the enterprise funds are sitting. And these are just operational accounts, so they will not include those capital infrastructure, capital equipment purchases. This is just strictly the operations of those departments. And the third page is going to be those special revenue funds, funds like transportation or transit, the library, NAS biota plant, and flood control maintenance. That's high level where those are sitting year to date. And then I provided the objects, which are those very descriptive regular employees, overtime, electricity, where those are sitting at for the entire operations for the city of Minot year to date. And that's about 4 pages. And the last page is going to be where we're sitting for sales tax collections. That's through the month of April. We have not yet seen May's collections. You can tell by the graph that it's very, sorry, I did not follow through on the screen. I'm terrible at that. That's why we have Jennifer Clean. My apologies. Well, you can see how volatile the revenue source is because it's all over the place. But I wanted to provide that as well. I did make an error in that 2.77% is year over year, not year to date. So when you're comparing 2026 collections year over year to 2025, that's what the 2.77% is. So we're a little bit higher, but we are a little below that 1.65% compared to the 2026 budget. So just to keep you up to date on that. Do you have any specific questions as you're looking through? Some of these are, very self-explanatory. A lot of contracts have hit your guys' approval. So as they kind of get put into the system, they roll into that encumbrances, but maybe they don't get spent right away. So Lance Meyer's budget, the engineering, you'll see there 78% because they've already bid all their $10 million in street maintenance. So it kind of skews those numbers. The finance department, we've already had our audit, so those costs have already hit the budget. IT, a lot of the annual maintenance agreements and subscriptions have already hit. So you'll see kind of those, nothing out of the norm, I guess, for comparing previous year's spend rates. But wanted to bring it to your attention and review. If you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Blessam.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenna. I'm going to ask the same question I think as last year, and it's on that point exactly. Is there any way for us to get to a better timing-based view of this? Because to be honest, I mean, I feel like I know the numbers pretty well, but I don't know how we even look at it if it's simply a timing question about things getting spent or put into the system before we were expecting. Because, I mean, telling us we're 70% of the way along a budget really doesn't tell us if we're ahead or below. I mean, we've got in our agenda tonight, we've got engineer estimates that are above what we're going to end up spending. We actually might be on the good side of some of them. So how do we get at that timing? Do you guys have the ability to do that a little bit different coming out of the system?
Alderman Blessam, I wish there was a perfect answer. A lot of it is, I mean, we get property taxes in the first quarter of the year. So you're kind of looking at the revenue side while also looking at the expense side. And it's really hard to do in the middle of the year. We keep an eye on it year over year to see what are the spikes. But I don't have a great answer for that, unfortunately.
If I can continue.
Go ahead.
So if you had to say it now, are we on track? I mean, I think we're spending more on police, right? I mean, I feel like I should know where we stand, and I feel like I don't. I think that's the hard part is we've got to be spending more there because we've got more people on staff. Outside of that, I don't feel like we've gone too crazy. I mean, we got the item tonight to talk about the pound. I mean, there's things we know about, but we see sales tax, but how are we sitting?
I think we're sitting okay. I mean, obviously there are some highlights, but a lot of them are explanatory. The police specifically, I mean, we did budget to, I think it was 12 sworn positions that were authorized but not funded. Obviously, the pound has cost a little more than we were anticipating. But I think if there was something to be of concern about, you probably would have already known about it. But a lot of these are in the norm and explainable. I'm not seeing any wild things come through. There's always cost-saving measures we could do, but I think we've already taken a little bit of an effort at that with our general fund hiring freeze, if you want to call it that. But I think we're probably fine with where we're at right now. But
City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alderman Blessam. I agree. I think there's something that we could work to a better level of fidelity with department heads and their staff, where, for example, on the column we're looking at, where we're just using a straight line 1/12, right? Or we're using how many days are in the year, and we're at June 12th, as of June 12th, versus try to get a little bit more fidelity and a better understanding to help you better understand the projected at this point. So if in fact we were, as of 31 March, and so we're 1/4 of the way through the year, the target wouldn't necessarily be 25%. If in fact the departments we know are spending more early, they knew that, right? So I'm just making this up, but it could be 20 could have been their plan, percent of annual budget the first 3 months of the year. And although it says 25%, to Jenna's point, like the engineer, they're higher. There's a reason for being higher. So I think that is on us to help better inform you, to keep you, more frequently updated and just better understand that as well. But I think we can work towards that.
City Finance Director.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we do have the functionality in our ERP system to do monthly budgeting. So the capability exists there. However, that creates a situation where it requires a lot of manpower to sift through that. And then it also requires a lot more stringent following of our procedures, because if there's something, for example, if somebody in a department has purchased something and not gone through the requisition process, there could be items out there that the city is obligated already that we don't have recorded in our system. So the old adage of garbage in, garbage out on a computer system if we're going to do the monthly budgeting and expend that effort and go through all that exercise to do that, then we need to make sure that absolutely there would be no exceptions to the process then either.
If I
Alderman
could, Mr. Mayor,
Blessing.
thank you. So Dave, I mean, really just kind of the same continuation of what I was just asking. So we've got a sheet here for the general fund that's showing us about 2.2 million above, the revised budget is about 2.2 million above the original, which I think of revised budget as, hey, that's kind of what we think is going to happen because we've had budget amendments to make it happen already, right? So we're already 2.2 ahead of that. Like, I think we've got a good familiarity with you and your team. So I think I'm not worried, but I also can't see it. So that's why I don't know if there's a good answer there somewhere. But I'm with you. You know, we don't need to double the staff to get the data points I need twice a year. I think we would need to have the warning bells ringing, which I think we would if there was a major problem coming. And I assume we're not there because that's not the message we're getting right now.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessum, and you're correct. I mean, it's a lot of diminishing returns. We spend a lot of effort to go through that process, and if the return isn't there, we've wasted a lot of time and effort to do that. However, you're exactly right. The difference between the original budget and the revised budget is the changes we made to date in the form of budget amendments. So that's an increased spend. Some of those budget amendments come with revenues on the other side. For example, if we get a grant for some particular purchase or program, you know, it comes with the revenue to offset that increased budget. So that's something that we really have to watch out for. Keeping in mind there's some caveats with this budget that we're operating under right now. The original budget that was adopted anticipated using just north of $11.5 million in reserves to balance the general fund budget. That included the unfunded police department positions and some other items. It also anticipated the change in the ordinance for the transfer of the economic development sales tax, which did not pass second reading. So presumably, if we fully execute the budget on the expenditure side, that's another approximately 1.1 million that we will be short on the revenue side. And when you add the additional expenditures associated with the additional staffing at the police department and the pound services, we're probably north of $14 million of reserves and usage if we fully execute the budget as it's laid out today. So our team sits and looks through this. You know, we're looking for anomalies. We look a lot at trends, things that really jump out. Knowing from past history, we know some of those items that hit early in the year or are one-time big expenses that skew the numbers a little bit. We look a lot at our staffing levels, some of the things like the department supplies or equipment that are more in control or they have the ability to execute individually. So we do pay a lot of attention to that and definitely follow along those trends.
Mr. Mayor, if I can continue.
Yes, go ahead.
So Dave, just, and again, I appreciate this. I think it's great, and thanks for putting it together, and I'm glad we were able to look at it. But that little 2-minute speech gave me everything I wanted, right? Like here, you know, I think of it like a waterfall. Hey, here's what we thought it was going to be. Here's where we're headed, and here's the differences in between. Because I think that's the meat of where we're sitting today. These are all explainable, and they're decisions that have been made along the way.
And Mr. Mayor and Alderman Blessum, I think the big takeaway is at this point in the first 5.5 months of execution of this budget, we're not in a position where we're going to save enough money in the budget if we keep along this same trend where we would not tap into those reserves at all. You know, now that I think the big question is if we're able to execute enough savings to soften the blow a little bit, especially on some of those items that weren't necessarily anticipated being fully recognized in this budget cycle. For example, the extra staffing that's been brought on board, some of those types of things.
Okay. Any other questions for the finance team? All right. Thank you both very much. And we are open for discussion from the council if there's any. Again, thank you to the presenters for giving us the information. Seeing no further discussion, we're on to item 3.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Meeting adjourned.